my hair was a little bit messy, I was like, overachiever, must make it look tidier.
But it's an audio recording, so it's really overachieving, even though it's audio, but you...
Yeah, you're meeting other overachievers, you got to be put together.
Hi, everyone. It's me again. Welcome to the Handful of These podcast, where we bring you practical Buddhist wisdom for a happier life. I'm Kaisin. I started a business at the age of 19.
Hi, I'm Cheryl. I started my anxiety, which is my best achievement, from the age of 15.
And hi, I'm Thubten Damcho, and I graduated from Princeton on a Public Service Commission scholarship.
And today we are gonna talk about the overachiever mindset, hence the introduction. We're gonna share more of our overachievements in this episode and how to balance that with our Buddhist practice. Yeah. So Venerable, for listeners who haven't heard of you or listened to the previous episode, which was fantastic on sex and the Buddhist, can you share with our listeners a little bit of your background?
So I was born and raised in Singapore. And as I said, I went overseas on scholarship, and then, and I was on track to, have a very good career in the civil service. But along the way, I met the Buddha Dharma, and that really got me questioning my priorities in life. And eventually I ordained here at Sravasti Abbey. I live in Newport, Washington in the US. We're on the West Coast. And I've lived here for 10 years now. So I received my novice ordination in 2013. And then I received higher ordination in Taiwan in 2016. Yeah, so it's always a delight to reconnect with everyone in Singapore. So thank you for having me here again.
Thank you for being back. And to the topic on overachiever, I just want to ask all of you, do you consider yourself an overachiever? Starting from Cheryl.
I think so. So I think from young, I always had that mindset where I need to be the best at what I do. And so when I went to school, I got a scholarship to Singapore. I'm from Malaysia. And when I went to Singapore, I had to go to the best school, the most elite school. And I won't name it, but one of the top elite schools. Then after that streak continued. Like when I went to uni, it had to be the best in some sort of field. And then only I'll go and study. And then when I went to start work, it had to be the best in some sort of industry and whatever. So yes, definitely I have that overachiever mindset. And of course, it also manifests as when I have my anxiety, I need to have the worst critic, the most overachieving critic to beat myself up. So yes, overachieving in all different senses. What about you, Venerable Damcho?
I love this question because I've never thought of myself as an overachiever because I'm always number two. I'm just never good enough. I'm not number one. Yeah, so how could I be a real overachiever? Yeah, I think for me, underneath that need to achieve is a strong sense of I'm just never good enough. Yeah, so I think it was the first time I ever heard someone call me an overachiever was Brother PJ, I think, who I think you might know too. We were just having a casual conversation because he was actually my next door neighbor. So and we reconnected after I came back from the US, and so did he. And he was just casually saying, this is how overachievers behave. And I was like, that's not me. What are you talking about? So it's actually been a slow revelation of, what these behaviors mean. Yeah, because to me, it seemed very normal. Or I guess I placed into student groups where everybody behaved that way. So it seemed very normal, and then your whole idea of what is success or failure is so skewed. Yeah, simple example, like I remember for the mock PSLE, in my class I got 91, right, which is still an A star, and I felt very proud of myself because my math is very poor, and the class average I think was 94. So 91 was below average. Yeah.
Wow,
I failed. Yeah, so because of that, I don't see myself as an overachiever. And some of that is a lack of self-cognizance, self-awareness, I think. Yeah.
Right. It's interesting you say that because I can relate. I also am not number one. but somehow people call me an overachiever. So I scratch my head, just like, yeah, I'm quite average, right? I mean, I didn't go to elite school. I didn't even finish or like pursue any further studies or get a degree, right? My highest education is a diploma in business studies. I think it's just more maybe the accolades or track record that I'm associated to or with, that people say, wow, you know, Kai-Sing, you're so smart, you know, you've achieved so many things, but deep down inside, I'm just like struggling. But I would say if I were to look back, I did exhibit those kind of overachieving behaviors and mindsets. So, wow, I have to study really hard, you know, get good grades, and just keep being very restless in striving. So I literally can't sit still. You know, I have to go for electives, CCA, you know, partake in competition, win some medals, and then, you know, I have all these things on my on my shelf, and I still don't feel really good about myself. There's still this imposter syndrome that's like, oh yeah, am I really good? And there's just never an end to the chase until I met the Dhamma. So, which brings us to another part of this conversation, right? Because I think the whole mode of striving, if it's kind of misdirected, it can be unhealthy and not very conducive to the practice. So I'm actually quite curious to know, Venerable, you know, when you became a nun, do you see any of these tendencies change?
Just slowly over time, yeah. But I think first of all, to even recognize the tendency, I moved here 10 years ago, and the first time I sat a long 3-month winter retreat. I mean, I had some goals. Yeah, what are you like gonna do with yourself if you don't have goals to achieve?
Enlighten.
Yeah, no, I'm not so like. We talk about realistic goals. So stream entry, right? Come on, stream. I wrote it out, you know, I mean, this is like a Mahayana tradition that I'm in, yeah, but because I grew up in the Theravada tradition too. So I was like, okay, let's be real. Yeah, stream entry can be done. Yeah? Name what those things are. It's like, okay, maybe by the end of, I actually really had the thought, maybe by the end of 3 months, I will be able to walk through a wall. You know, yes, that's how deluded I was. I was like, it's possible. You just have to put the effort in. That's how it's been your whole life. And then you read the book where it's like, okay, these are the steps to follow. These are the, I don't know if you're familiar with this. We have like the 9 stages of sustained attention, or something like 9 stages to cultivating serenity. Sometimes in the Tibetan tradition, Thangkas, you see a person with an elephant and a monkey. And it's all symbolic, yeah, of the stages of moving toward samadhi, yeah. And then you have to combine that with insight, yeah. So, you know, I was the first time I read this, and I was like, oh, there are these 9 steps, you know, with clear instructions, you know, like, sometimes you find the object, sometimes you're able to stay on it longer and longer, and then you lose it. And so throughout the retreat, I was constantly asking, like, what stage am I at? Is this stage 1? Is this stage 2? Yeah. And after a certain point, I was like, oh, I think it's really hard to even get to stage 3, which is like more sustained attention on the breath or whatever object it is. And I just really started to push. You know, I would sit extra long session, trying like, come on, you can do this. I was so disappointed somewhere in the middle of retreat, realizing I'm not gonna get beyond past stage 3. Or you're gonna be stuck here. Even stage 3 itself is like amazing to accomplish. Yeah. So, but then I didn't see that as an affliction at the time. You know, it's just how I've lived my whole life. Yeah. So at the end of retreat, I realized, wow, this is how I approach everything, with a lot of this kind of, you know, let's just push and make it through. So just that slow recognition, and then to see that repeat in so many areas of my life here at the monastery. So I think it's just having that space, right, where I start to recognize these things. So, you know, the next year I thought, okay, we're not going to push and retreat. Then I found myself, like you said, distracted, and I created some huge project outside of the retreat. Yeah, I'm sitting 5 sessions a day, and then I'm going to go and translate this very complex thing in all my breaks. Yeah, push. Because, you know, I'm not going to achieve it in the retreats. I'm going to achieve it somewhere else. Yeah. So again and again and again. Yeah. So Venerable Thubten was instrumental in helping to point out these habits to me. She's my teacher and the abbess of the monastery. Yeah, I'm like, oh, okay, these are some habits that they don't serve me. Wow. I really have to rethink how I approach my life. So yeah, it's been a slow process. Yeah.
You pointed out two things that is particularly interesting to me. One is that you didn't realize the afflictions that you were in. And I think that's the problem that a lot of us have, right? We just don't know that we are in pain, or we don't know that we are suffering. And then we just continue with the same lifestyle until one day, either you have a terrible breakdown or your body just stops functioning. Then only you're like, oh shit, I've been living life in a horrible way. I have inflicted so much pain on myself. And then that's where you start to look for a way out and start to like, maybe I should change a little bit. Then the second thing that was very interesting to me was that the idea of how that overachieving tendency, because it's a very strong habitual tendencies, right? So if you don't work with it, it can always change the object. First is the meditation. Second is it could be some other project that you're interested in or whatever it is. So yeah, I thought that was very, very interesting and very relatable as well. Because I think I also never really understood my anxiety. Like I never really understood what is it for? What is it trying to protect? And it was kind of a pain that I was like, it's good. If I'm not anxious, if I'm not critical of myself, my whole life I'll just be a slog and my whole life will just crumble. So I kind of never really saw how painful it really was to myself. Yeah, and I think just reflecting on my meditation practice as well, I realized I bring that into the cushion, that the overachieving tendencies to be like, and it manifests in terms of like so much tension, right? Because you must control how the sit is like. For me, yeah, I need to experience that calm, and the calm cannot just be short, it must be long, it must be vision and brightness and everything like that. So yeah, I just wanted to point that out.
Oh my God, totally. You know, like there was once during the Vesak day, there were so many things going on. I was volunteering, then I committed to, sitting overnight. And that was like the worst overnight seat that I've ever experienced, because I keep opening my eyes and then it's like starting from 9 p.m, then it ends at 4 a.m, right? Where we do the morning chanting. Every single 10-minute block is just excruciating. And I keep telling myself, I have a lot of things that I need to do tomorrow. Am I able to do it? And then here I am like having the inner critics like, wait, I'm supposed to be peaceful. I'm not feeling peaceful. Why is everyone sitting so still? How long is this going to last? And I was so in pain that at 3 a.m. or so, close to the 4 a.m. mark, I really just gave up. And I went back, I took a cab and I was in tears. And the funny thing was, my mom knew about my intention to sit overnight, and she discouraged me from doing so. So I had this sense of ego, right? I'm going to go back. My mom is going to find out that I didn't sit through the night, and she's going to say, Sila, I told you already, don't push yourself so hard. And I can't stand that. So my plan was to be very quiet, open the gate, and then before she wakes up in the morning, I would wake up first and then go to the Vesak day to volunteer. But lo and behold, I forgot to bring my house keys. And I tell you, I felt so lousy about myself. I really felt like a failure. I just like, okay, I have no choice but to ring the doorbell and gonna get all this nagging. And at that point in time, it was quite a aha moment for me also, because I'm like, hey, I'm suffering, The practice is supposed to lead me out of suffering, but here I am clinging on to this idea of, okay, I have to commit to my intention. I have to feel peaceful, and then everybody else can't know what's going on inside me. And I was just wondering, like from a Buddhist perspective, what do you think is the root cause of all this desire to achieve, and how do we know when it is bringing us pain, and how do we know when the pain of striving, which is sometimes good, can actually lead us to the end of pain? Because there are two parts, right? Pain leading to more pain, pain leading to less pain.
Wow, that's a really powerful story, actually. I think just your recognition of all those things going on in your mind, especially the like, I've got to look like I have it together.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good clue. I mean, from a Buddhist perspective, all our afflictions arise on the basis of ignorance. Yeah. And here it's ignorance of functioning in many ways, right? First of all, thinking, oh, here's this real person in this body who has this mind, or is the mind, whatever, a possessor of it, or who is the mind. And so there's someone here that achieves things that, all these external things relate to. Here's mine, my achievement, my trophy, my accolades, and they reflect on me. Yeah. So even just seeing ourselves in that way, right? Seeing the external world as, oh, there are these objective things, separate from me and my mind, that I have to obtain to be successful, or control, like you said, oh, I want certain things. How am I going to get them? Control the external world, which is very different from just create the cause, right? And see things in terms of dependent arising. So on the basis of that, and then we get fixated with trying to organize everything. And I think with achievement, or this kind of painful striving, what's at work is what we call the 8 worldly concerns. So that's one of the teachings in the graduated stages of the path to awakening that we study in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. And so it's craving for material success or material wealth, right? And aversion for the opposite of that, poverty or lack of wealth, attachment to sense pleasure, and then strong aversion to unpleasant sensory experiences. But I think especially with the achievement piece, it's attachment to your good reputation and complete aversion to having a bad one, and then attachment to praise, wanting people to say nice things about you, and then aversion to blame. So I think it could vary for each person, which is the main driver. So sometimes we've had discussion groups here, like look at which one is the main driver in your daily life behavior. So for me personally, it's very much about attachment to praise or blame, especially from people I consider very important. It's like, it's like I'm a little dog almost, the one retreat I was looking at this, is like, you feed the little dog a bone, it's like, yay! Right? The people are like, good dog, good dog. You're like, yay, they said I'm so good. You're rolling around in the mud, right? Oh, go fetch a stick. You're like, yay! And then the owner very happy. I'm like, wow, this mind is really not much better than this kind of little dog mind. And I'm going to be reborn as a dog if I continue like this. Yeah.
Right. So you mentioned the root cause of the painful striving is ignorance. Just to help our listeners here a bit, you mentioned the 8 worldly winds, right? So there are four pairs: praise and blame, that's pair number 1; pain and pleasure, pair number 2; gain and loss, 3; and the last one is fame and disrepute, right? And because it comes in pairs, that means either sides we would suffer. Then how do we find the balance?
I would say it's we have to step out of that framework completely, so that's the problem with these kinds of like dichotomous frameworks, I think. It's like you get stuck in this, like it's either this or that. And you find yourself you yo-yo between the two, and it's actually having to shift your mind outside of such a view at all. So I would say, overcoming the 8 worldly concerns. For a start, recognizing their disadvantages, right? With any Buddhist practice, it's always like, okay, is this way of thinking serving me or not? Does it bring about benefits? Does it benefit other people? Does it benefit myself? And really making examples from our own experience. But I would say, especially with the 8 worldly concerns, what's helped me so much is coming back to my motivation for what I'm doing and focusing on what's happening internally. With overachievement, it's like, what am I getting outside? What's this external thing, whether it's sense pleasure or some material thing? But now I come back to, why am I engaging in this activity? What kind of internal benefit is it going to bring for myself or for others? So if I'm very, very clear about my motivation for doing something, and that it's a long-term motivation, right? It brings benefit now and in the future. Or like you said, it might be painful in the short term, but I know it's going to be beneficial in the long term. Then I think, then it's worthwhile. Then no matter what happens, people criticize me or whatever, I can come back to, wait a second, the starting point is good. My motivation is clear. So that's helped me a lot. Just coming back to that, taking time to really get clear about my motivation. And the moment I'm working on it. Sometimes you're working on a long project, right? And then, you get exhausted or whatever. Then to check out, like, did my motivation start to deviate? Maybe I started out with like, I mean, I'm thinking of when I used to teach. Yeah. It's like, oh, I really want to benefit these students. Yeah. But along the way, it's like, oh, could this also be about my job performance? Right? Because I'm a school teacher and how they do at school reflects on my teaching skills and the bonus I'm going to get. Yeah. So it's like, oh, is that creeping in? Yeah. I want this to be about the students. Yeah. How do I make sure I pull that back? And then if it's really genuinely about the students, then I always find, I have energy to keep going, and it doesn't fall into like, you have to perform, everyone, on this test by the end of the year. I don't care what you're going through. I'm not looking at you as human beings. I want to see those grades, which is really awful. Yeah.
So it's so important to routinely check back with yourself and remind yourself, what's your motivation? What's your intention? And when we do that as well, it can help us to fixate less on the outcome goal, like the whole class scores like 100 marks, and rather start to take note of the little progress throughout the process and the journey as well. Yeah, which can help us to, I guess, take a little bit more relaxed attitude and more open and exploratory approach towards heading towards wherever we want to get to.
That's interesting. And it almost seemed like the achievement is the result of our good intention and effort, versus how originally, if it's misplaced, right, it would be like, oh, the desire to overachieve driving us. And then we might not necessarily get the result that we want. And then that's where our whole world crumbles, because it comes from external sources, which is beyond our control. I mean, we can't even control our own minds, what other people think of us, or how other people would like to recognize us or reward us, etc. So I find that to be very, very powerful. And I also wonder, because sometimes people might have this saying, right, hey, don't try so hard. I literally have Dharma brothers and sisters come up to me and say, Kai-Sing, I think you're trying very hard. Maybe you should let go a little bit. But then I'm thinking, is it really about not trying hard, or is it about trying hard the right way? Because if I were to recollect, the Buddha did try very hard, right? He touched the earth and he's like, may the earth be my witness until, I attain enlightenment. And he literally had to fight his inner demons or defilements in order to realize what he realized, and then have the compassion to teach us, right? So it's not dualistic per se. But then again, how do we, reconcile? Are there certain signposts that you would look out for beyond the inner intention? How do you know you're trying too hard, not trying so hard?
But before that, going back, when you were saying, to really look at what is this drive to overachieve, to even unpack that, before we get into the setting a good intention part. And when we start to recognize, okay, some of these behaviors are perhaps perceived as excessive by other people, right? And to check, true or not true, what is my motivation behind this? Like you say, sometimes people come to tell us these things because they are our friend and they are concerned, right? When I first moved to the Abbey, two people are like, you should take a break. I'm like, what are you talking about? What break? Breaks are for lazy people. Or you're not getting enough sleep. I'm like, sleep is for the weak. Unfortunately, that's the U Chicago motto, and it got stuck in my head. Like, what do you mean? Yeah. And I heard that as judgment. Like you said, you don't like people to tell you, you just relax. I'm like, no, leave me alone. I run my own life. So it took me a long time to even hear, okay, there's some concern there. People are perceiving that I'm not balanced. Maybe there are some behaviors that I'm doing that are, and you're so fixated on the external achievement, you don't see, maybe I'm neglecting my relationships. Maybe that's what my friends are saying. Or I'm losing my temper with them. And sometimes, it's just that the people who care about us are seeing something out of whack. Yeah. I will say that was the chief motivator in me pausing and rethinking all these behaviors. We had a community workshop here where we wrote feedback for each other. And mine was around, people are just concerned that you spend so much time working. I'm like, or they're like, this is taking you away from the community. I thought, wow. And that was the first time I actually started to listen to that feedback and really look inside and see, what is driving that need to overachieve. because, like you said, if the need is to feel better about ourselves, no external thing is going to accomplish that. And that's the painful setup, right? It's like, yeah, no matter how many trophies you have, it's like, I still feel lousy. Yeah. So if the striving is to heal some kind of internal sense of lack, yeah, we just make sure you're not barking up the wrong tree. Yeah. So that's right striving, right? It's first of all checking up what is driving the striving. What are you actually trying to accomplish? You know? I mean, I say this because it's going to be so different for each of us, and I'm curious, what you come to, what's driving that. There was a young woman who came to the Abbey who grew up with a lot of trauma, tremendous amount of, was abused, and but externally presented as so incredibly successful, like making tons of money in Silicon Valley and all that. And it was very interesting for me to watch her journey here. Like, she's like, letting go of the career was terrifying, right? Like, she saw that the whole overachievement was like a shield to protect her from a world that was abusing her, right? It's like, if I have this career, if I have the money, if I'm independent, nobody can trap me, nobody can bully me. This is my defense. Yeah. I thought, wow, okay, and the sense of, because you've been abused, you think you're worthless. So it's like, no, I'm not. Yeah, I'm gonna prove it to you. So I don't come from a background of abuse, so it was interesting to see, like, oh, okay, that's one thing that can drive the overachieving. Then what is it for me? Yeah, what am I trying to achieve there? Yeah. And so for me, a lot of it was hoping to have love. Thinking having all these external things is going to bring love. And the moment I recognized that, it was like, oh, I don't need it from outside. I can love myself. Then relax. Yeah. So
Right.
I don't know your thoughts. What's driving that need to achieve?
I have so many thoughts on this. Like, I'm thinking, like, okay, I think I'll share later, right? I think what is driving me, but like, just to respond to you as well. I just wonder, is it true that it's completely internal? Like, only we can give ourselves reliable sense of happiness and love? Is it bad, like, if we outsource it from external? Or like, what's the balance? Like 50% external, 50% internal? Because I was having a conversation with a friend who's not Buddhist, and so I was like, I'm 10 internal. It's all inside you. You can control that. You can generate it. You can train that, right? Purify your mind. And they were like, oh my God, you Buddhists are horrible. We need validation. We need people to love us and let us know we're worthy. That's nice. That's pleasant. That's fun. So what is the balance there that we should be ideally striving for in a healthy way?
My goodness, I love our overachiever vocabulary. I just need to step back and say, it's like, is it right? Is it wrong? Should I be doing this? What is the percentage? Yeah, 50%. Yeah. What's the measure?
We need data.
Oh yeah, that's so true.
You have this invisible world of standards that is shaping you that you don't even know. Yeah, it was a counselor who pointed that out to me. She's like, you might want to look at some of the standards you have. And I looked at her like, standards? What do you mean? These are facts. It's like, what do you mean standards I hold? This is the way, the truth, the life, this is, the world's like this. I'm like this, you are like this. Anyway, I'm like, oh, wow. Okay, look at the standards I hold. Yeah. So it should not. I think we come back to the principle of dependent arising, right? Multiple causes and conditions. So yes, one piece I would say, and then in Buddhist practice, a lot of the emphasis is on what we can cultivate internally. But of course, you're influenced by your peer groups, right? So sensibly, if your practice is not very strong, don't hang out with people who are going to make you commit non-virtue, support you in committing non-virtue. Yeah, so it's a balance of both, I would think. Listening to advice from wise people. So it's who you trust to help you understand who you are. Yeah. So do I trust the friends who, are encouraging me to do things that are not beneficial, or do I listen to my teacher, right, who I trust is wise? Yeah. And then so if my teacher is disapproving, I will think carefully about, not necessarily judge myself or feel poorly, right, but to think, okay, something's up here that I really need to look at. Yeah, because this is someone who is wise that I trust, and I trust their advice. So let me really think about it. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, it seems like there's no black and white, like 50-50 or 30-50, 80-20. You know? And it's just about sitting with the uncertainty that maybe there is no right answer. I think from my personal experience, to answer Cheryl's question, is to also have the discernment to understand, okay, at this point in life, do I have the capacity to accept myself? And if I'm honest and truthful, I know maybe I need to lean on somebody to offer me strength first before I can then offer strength within for myself. Then I think that's also okay. But to eventually realize that I still believe and hold this thought that we have to eventually realize that we can only rely on ourselves till the end, but we need somebody to walk the journey with us. Yeah.
Or maybe too, from a Buddhist perspective, and what can be shocking to your friend too, right, who's non-Buddhist, it's like the refuge is the Dharma. It's not a human being. The refuge is in our realizations. It's in the compassion and the wisdom that we're realizing in our own mind stream. And it's the compassion and wisdom that's in someone else's mind stream. Like right now, what's very big in our community is that, a major teacher just passed away. Lama Zopa Rinpoche passed away suddenly. And people are shocked or grieving. Right? But Venerable Children has been giving talk after talk about how, the physical manifestation of your teacher passes away. But what he has left with you, is the teaching that you have every single day. That's what this person was trying to impart to you. And it was the same with the Buddha, right? He's like, don't cry or grieve. The Vinaya is your teacher. You will always have the Dhamma with you. And the most important thing is to actualize it in your own mind stream. And so I think what I respect in my teacher is recognizing, they have certain ways of thinking that I want to emulate. They have behaviors that I think are, really admirable, but I can cultivate them too. They do not rest in that person and then they die and it's like, it's like, no, they're teaching me how to do it for myself. And then I have to do that for other people.
It's so beautiful. And like the Buddha always says, that when you see the Dharma, you see me as well.
Yeah.
Cheryl, you wanted to share something earlier on.
I'm sorry to the editor, I just say in advance. But we will go back to the question that Venerable Damcho asked just now, like what are the drivers for our overachieving tendencies? And I'll be curious to hear from Kai Sing as well. But I think for me, it comes from a place of lack and unworthiness. And it's because growing up, I was surrounded by relatives who basically did really well, had full scholarships, they were doing very well. And in terms of like the family tree as well, my father was like the ugly duckling in the siblings of 5. So he was always the odd one out, he was always the weird one. And then within my family, I was the smarter one compared to my sister. But at the same time, seeing all my relatives who were better, I always had that sense of lack. And I always had to, I guess, like prove, like be the proof that my family is not that weird. So I had to overachieve in that sense. So I don't know, it's lack and also needing to prove something. But because it comes from this place of lack, it is a very, very painful striving. Just to use the word that Venerable Damcho used, painful striving, because the whole insecurity, uncertainty about myself, the doubt is always there as I try to head towards a place of worthiness through external achievements. Yeah.
Right.
For yourself, I think.
I think for me, subconsciously, I think it's about the proving part as well. I grew up never really wanting explicit external validation from people. In fact, I do feel quite lousy since young because, I'm a bench player in basketball. I feel like, okay, I have all these medals, but I don't really contribute to them. So it's part of me that says, okay, I need something that I can call my own, that I have achieved for myself, to prove to myself and also to other people that I can do it. I'm independent. I don't need to rely on anybody. This is something that is mine, not shared. And I think it comes very subconsciously also the restless mind, like wanting to just fill my mind with things so that I don't really have to sit still and address the inner critic and the voice. So it's about doing, doing, doing. And it can comes off as overachieving, right? But I think when I started learning the Dhamma, then really looking within, hey, what's the driving factor? I realized, okay, I don't need to prove to anybody, but do I also have to prove to myself? What is it that I can really call my own? So when I had a long retreat, I think 1.5 months in Amaravati in UK, one of the monasteries, I was kind of searching and also asking myself about the identity. So if I were to forgo the business, do I still call myself an entrepreneur? Because that was like the identity that I was tied to, right? For 2-3 years, it was very, very prominent. And I feel, a sense of pride, and people like, wow, how do you achieve so much? And then having to let go of that thought was interesting, because it's like, what do I call myself then? Who am I? Then I realized it's really the fundamental things about my virtue. That is what I'm going to take with me when I die. And then also the memories of, the good that I've done. And it's really not so much about the act of doing or the act of achieving anymore. So there's a little bit of recalibration there. Again, outwardly, it might seem like the same thing, but then inside there is a shift in how I show up to day-to-day life and the driving force, which is much healthier. I wouldn't say that it's always on point. Sometimes I still lose my way. Then I have to, have friends to call me out to say, hey, I think you're a bit working too hard. What's your priorities? What's driving you? Then, I take a step back, recalibrate, and it's a constant process.
Yeah, and that's totally, I just remember Venerable Thubten telling us, balance is like walking. You're just constantly shifting your weight. Yeah, it's not some kind of magic steady state. It's like, oh, I have balance now and it will forever be the same. It's like, wait, impermanence, remember? Yeah. It's like, no. Yeah, so it's like walking. Yeah, you're just constantly shifting from one leg to the next, and it's this ongoing process. What you both shared reminded me of 2 teachings I received from Venerable. Early on, she told this story about how her brother is a doctor. Yeah. And so she also had this whole high achieving life. She went to college early. And she's on track to be a school teacher and all that, and has a good husband and so forth. And then she becomes a nun. Yeah. And her whole family's like, what? And then so she met up with her brother, and he was just like, what do you want to do with yourself in the next 5 years? He's like, have you just lost all goal and direction in life? And she said to him, I want to be a kinder person. And he was like, I was just blown away by that answer. I just sat there with that for a long time. And there's a part of me that's like, that's all? That's all you want to be? If Venerable Thubten, you're like super successful in my mind and blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, she just wants to be a kinder person. And that's what matters. Wow. So just sitting with that, just even convincing myself or coming to it on my own terms, right? It's like, actually what, as you said, genuinely matters is our virtuous attitudes towards ourselves and other people. And that was one. I'm losing it. I forget what else I wanted to say. It's okay.
It's okay. Yeah. Later, if it comes up again, you can always revisit that as a bonus story at the end.
Yeah, I'm wondering whether it's realistic for us to have this balance of sorts, whatever we perceive of it, because there are so many external forces, especially from society, right? In the capitalistic and materialistic world, people is like, oh, you must strive hard, get an A, and then we have tiger moms and parents, and then our academic system kind of only reward those who are at the top of end of the bell curve. So how do we then live in this world when we have this balance to say, I'm content, it's good enough, I don't really have to strive so much? Is it really realistic?
No, and I remember what I was going to tell you. 2 things. First was another tip. One instruction Venerable Thubten gave me very early on drove me almost insane. Yeah, because we were talking about, as a high achiever, you want some specifics, right? Like 50% or whatever. This give me something I can hang on to, a spreadsheet or whatever. She kept telling me you have to find your own center. I was like, what kind of new age nonsense is that? What do you mean find my own center? Like, where is it? Can you be more specific? So I sat and thought about it for a long time. Yeah, what is this center? And maybe if I retranslated her instruction based on what a lot of teaching she gives, it's how do we learn to evaluate ourselves? So, and that's really hard. Like you said, that you are conditioned from a young age. Yeah, Cheryl, you had great example of how your family conditioning shapes so much of how you see yourself. Yeah, my family is seen like this. I am this person in my family. This is how we relate. And so based on all this kind of storytelling from other people, you can decide whether you accept the story or not, right? So you do, and you're like, as a responsible family member, I must prove that we are, not weird. Kai-Sin, then you've made your own story. Yeah. Oh, okay. What is an entrepreneur and what does that mean in society? Yeah. Okay. I didn't follow the conventional route of getting a degree, but you know what? I know better than you, like college people. Yeah. And you have that, and I'm succeeding. Okay. So yeah, there's that whole story. Yeah. Based on what other people tell us, how we want to accept it. And to know that we can undo that as we get older. Maybe as a kid, there's a lot less agency, right? You're dependent on your parents for survival. You live in that house. A lot of the kid level things, I feel like, if I didn't follow the instruction, they're going to kick me out of the house. Yeah, I'm 8 years old. I can't survive. It feels like life and death at that age. Then you get older, it's like, no, it's not. I don't have to follow everything my parents taught me. I can be an adult and look back and see what is useful, what is not, what's true, what's not. Yeah. Do I want to prove that I spend my whole life proving that my family is X or Y? Sorry, I always think of those Chinese sword fighting serials, right? It's like, your parents, you are from the Pan family. I used to be Pan family, and then the Lee family disgrace us. So I must now kill everybody who is Lee. And that's the purpose of my whole life. I spent my whole life training in sword fighting, and I go and kill all the Lees. Then at the end, it's like, then I write poems in Chinese, like, why did I do this? So, I'm like, I don't want my life to be like that. Where I live out
very real, especially in Chinese New Year, right? Where everyone compares who does what.
Yeah, but I don't want to spend my life living out my parents' expectations. It's like, thank you, that's your idea of happiness, but that's not mine. Okay. So that's one piece. And then, like you said, looking at what society expects. Yeah, is it true that getting good grades is the ticket to success? And maybe you challenge that strongly, I bet, Kai-Sin, right? Like, what are you telling me about conventional education? Yeah. Why do I have to believe this? Yeah. So, but I found that maybe the last piece I want to add is just, if I'm driven by anger, and that's what's driving me when it's like, I need to prove myself, I need to fight you, fight your expectations, fight to show you who I really am. Underneath that, there's a lot of anger, and it's exhausting. As opposed to, being centered, like, I know who I am, a genuine sense of self-confidence, maybe. Like, these are my values, these are my motivations. And that's what drives my life. I don't need to prove myself to anyone. You can have your story about who you think I need to be, and I don't need to buy into it. I can give it back.
So I'm wondering, because there's a tipping point also, right? Sometimes tip into the aspect of, I'm more superior, I know what I want, I'm going to challenge your assumption, society doesn't know what it's doing. Then again, I know it's overachiever to have signposts and frameworks, but how do we know that we have tipped over to the other side?
So it's learning your own internal signposts, maybe. So that's the internal achiever, maybe. And that's learning to evaluate yourself. Only you know your own mind well. Yeah, short of someone who's clairvoyant and can see it. I think that's what a meditation practice helps us with. It's just learning, how does every single affliction manifest in my own experience? In Buddhism, we have all these lists, right? Attachment, then got definition, anger, and you spend time with that. So how do I know when I'm being driven by anger? And whether it's physical, taking the time to see what kinds of thoughts are driving, are running in the mind and driving my behavior. And that's how I find my internal signposts. it's very much an internal process, I would say, learning how my mind works and when it's afflicted. Yeah. And so you're right. The external behavior can be totally the same, but I'm, as you said, learning to calibrate internally. And then that's when I see that maybe for me, some of the signs is that I'm actually happy doing what I'm doing. I don't get burnt out. I don't get frustrated. There's a lot of joy. And that's when I know, okay, we're going on a good path. Yeah.
So it's like less greed, less hatred, and delusion, the reducing of the three poisons, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, guess what? That actually frees up a lot of energy. Hey.
It does. Cheryl, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm just thinking it's very hard because, at the start where Venerable Damcho, you mentioned that we always see things as like my achievements, my accolades. So that sense of self is very strong. And when there's that strong sense of self, it's also very easy to fall into the whole conceit, right? Of like feeling superior, feeling inferior, and feeling neutral. And it's almost like a very strong, like automatic like narrative in your mind. That person better, that person worse, that person same as me. And do you have any, like, can you speak a little bit more about that conceit, idea, comparison in relation to overachieving? Yeah.
It's such a painful state of mind. Yeah. And but like you said, it's so encouraged in society. I remember when I first decided to move to a monastery, one of my old friends from JC called me up and said, we need to talk. She was very concerned about my life choices. And when we sat down for lunch, she was like, how can you live without competition? I mean, this is a woman who was working in, I don't know, some kind of investment company. Yeah, she was working for Lehman Brothers, I think. And then Lehman Brothers collapsed. But she's like, no, it's cool. I'll find another job for sure. But she's working like 12, 16-hour days or some crazy thing like that in a fancy apartment with no time to do anything except eat, sleep, and exercise and go to work. And she's telling me that competition is very important, that if I don't have competition in my life, I will not improve myself. I'm like, oh, okay. At least I could sit there and be like, I hear that you're very concerned for me, but that's just not what I feel is helpful in my life. Yeah, but I think you've nailed it. Just even naming the thought, I'm better in whatever way. So you don't actually have a sense of any realistic sense of how you are in relation to others. Yeah, that's the definition of arrogance. Thinking you're better than someone who is actually better than you, thinking you're better than someone who is less not as good as you, thinking you're better than someone who is equal to you. When I looked at that, I was like, oh, okay, it's just that thought. I am better. You're just told, it doesn't matter externally what the actual situation is, right? It's just I'm better, or I have to be better. And what's helped me a lot is just looking at how that has damaged a lot of my personal relationships. I would say it's funny, but I don't know about you. It sounds like this is resonating, but it's only something that became very clear to me when I moved to a monastery. Like, I realized, oh, I relate to the other person my age. Like, it's like just to maybe because in the monastery, it's just become so stark. We're all supposed to be equals on the path or something like that. Yeah, striving together and supporting each other. And I'm like, I can't stand you because I think you're better or I should be better. I'm like, oh, it's so clear. Like, wow, this is how I relate to people my age. I don't compete with the older nuns because they're older. They're seniors and I have my own story about them. But the one who is like just the next in ordination, it's like, oh, okay, we're competing with each other. It's like, oh, I've related to all my friends like this. Oh, so painful. Yeah, so just seeing that and then really rethinking, like, how do I relate to people in a way that's kind, that's not based on measuring whatever sense of, and you're right, it just comes back to a sense of lack. I think you have something I don't, I better have something you don't. Yeah, then the heart is closed.
Right.
I noticed that in a retreat. Actually, it's so funny. So it was a 10-day retreat in Thailand, And so my mind was, having a lot of fun judging everybody. But the thing that I noticed was that it is a complete seesaw. So one day I will walk around and be like, oh, I'm sitting the straightest, I'm sitting the longest, I'm better than all of you. Then the next day, when I'm feeling sleepy or when the mind is just not getting together, I'll be like, oh my God, I'm the worst here. I'm going to, I'm not enlightened. I'm never getting enlightened. And it just constantly seesaws up and down, up and down. And there's just so much torture. It's really torture because when I'm down, then all the critical thoughts, all the anxiety, oh my God, everyone must be looking at me knowing that I thought that bad thought. But then when I'm feeling good, that whole narrative of like, everyone should be looking at me. Look at how I sit. Look at how I walk. So it's very ridiculous. But the aha moment really came when I realized this up and down is really stupid. What am I doing? If I feel great and I hold on to it, the next moment I'm going to feel shitty. And it was very helpful when I just realized that it's so pointless to cling on either of that, good or bad, because it's going to change anyway. Yeah.
And I think it requires a lot of introspection to even see that, right? But most of us don't get to even quiet our mind for just 1 minute. And we don't have the opportunity to see what exactly is inside. And when I'm hearing both of you, it seemed to me that it's not so much about not having standards, because I mean, the Vinaya is a form of standard, right? We have certain guidelines to uphold in order to support us in our practice. So it's not so much about foregoing the standards, but it's about the clinging to the standards. Then it becomes form of also kind of like a fetter, where we cling on to rites and rituals, we cling on to a specific framework or how things should be done, should not be done. And then when it causes us suffering, that's where we have to let it go. And similarly, it's also not so much about not having competition at all, but perhaps it's okay to have healthy comparisons. We rejoice in other people's good effort, right? Say, if I fellow friends who are also practicing and they share with me about their amazing meditation experience, and I shouldn't be like, oh, how come I don't have, how can they, just started in the practice and they experience so much, but I should cultivate sympathetic joy and mudita to say, wow, good for you, go on, and use them as a source of inspiration. So then that's where healthy comparison comes into the picture, rather than, oh, I'm not good enough, you're better, or I'm better, you're not good enough. So I think it's very interesting, because when we stop looking at things from a dualistic perspective, and then like Venerable, you mentioned not clinging on to like, oh, it has to be this way or that way, then a lot of all these things, affliction would just fall away. Like there's really nothing to cause us suffering anymore.
Yeah, like you said, rejoicing is a very powerful antidote to the competitive, jealous mind. Yeah. I think a lot of it is just learning how to name recognizing the affliction to begin with. What we're describing, I definitely got to see my inner critic very clear at the first retreat I sat. Then years later, you read these texts that have like these definitions of mental states, right? It's like, oh, that's arrogance. Duh. Because the different types of arrogance, I think I'm better, but I think I'm the worst is also arrogance. It's the flip side, right? Everybody's so good. I'm so special. I'm worse than the worst. Everybody can attain Buddhahood. I cannot. I'm special. It just comes back to that. Anytime you're thinking I'm special or I'm better, it's like, that's you, arrogance. You're not realistic. Go away. It doesn't help. Yeah.
That reminds me, like, I'm worst of the worst, reminds you of, how we have a culture of who sleeps later at night because they're working. It's like that also want to compete. Yeah, it's a form of ego and conceit, I suppose.
No, it's amazing. You can get arrogant about everything. Yeah, we are the overachiever club. You should have the podcast for the underachiever club, right? Who's worse? Yeah, who's more gangster? Who has served longer in jail or whatever? You can get arrogant about that too. That's very nice. Okay.
All right. We've covered a lot. Unfortunately, anything has to come to an end, but we hope this is just the beginning of our practice in terms of introspecting. We've covered quite a lot of topics. I'm wondering, Cheryl, any salient points that you took away from our chat?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really about going back into our drivers, our motivation and our intention, especially when we're feeling kind of out of whack. that's a clear, I think, signpost for you to just really check what's going on. Am I kind of moving away from the reason why I started? Yeah, could be something that everyone could reflect on as well.
Yeah, for me, what stood out most is about catching myself when I need certainty. It was an aha moment when you say, oh, all these vocabularies that we are using, the frameworks, the percentage, and just learning to sit with, what if I don't have the answer? How does that feel like? Yeah, I think that's my greatest takeaway. How about Venerable? Any, last piece of advice or things that you like to share?
Yeah, I love that you said this is just the beginning of our kind of introspective journey, because you touch on some really important things that really are at the heart of our suffering situation. Just anytime our sense of self gets overly puffed up, or we are holding on to some identity or story too tightly, that's really causing us a lot of pain. And it's very empowering to recognize that, oh, hang on, it's actually just thinking about things in an unrealistic or inaccurate way. And I can take time to shift the way I think. Yeah. And that's what changes everything. It's not about having to get something outside, or even to go for some kind of, I don't know, multi-million-dollar workshop. It's really just how am I thinking about this, and how do I slowly train myself to shift how I'm thinking about it. Yeah. As the last word, I wanted to bring this up. In the definition of joyous effort, I guess skillful striving might be another way to put it. I don't know what the equivalent term is. It might be the Venerable Children's translation of virya. I'm not sure. But it has 4 aspects, right? There's aspiration, right? So that comes from you already doing that inner work and reflecting, okay, what are the benefits of this? Why do I want to accomplish this? And then that very naturally drives your behavior. You know what I mean? You don't have to push. You don't have to like, must wake up at X time. It's like, oh, I've thought about the benefits. So it's naturally going to arise. And then keeping it stable, right, over time. And there's joy in the mind. But most important, the last piece, there's rest. I was so shocked when I received that teaching. It's like, part of joyous effort is rest, but that's for lazy people. It's like, no. It's knowing, like you said before, this is my capacity, and I need time to recuperate. I'm an ordinary being with body and mind. I want to keep going, so I rest with a good motivation, and then I come back when I can. And that's it. Yeah, it's not that you become a slob, right? That's our 2 extremes. Yeah, either you're the rabbit or turtle. Yeah. So that's why I always come back to. Yeah, that's my sense of recognizing my limitations and I have aspirations, and how to keep going in a kind of steady, sustainable way. Yeah.
Thanks. Very beautiful way to wrap up. And I think it also ties back to how we started, that it's really gradual how we let go and shed all these habitual tendencies of over striving or unskillful striving. So thank you once again, Venerable, for being on the show. And to all our listeners, if you like this episode, please do share with a friend. Hit the 5-star button on the review section. And till the next episode, may you stay happy and wise.